Hello and welcome back to oh god, that was almost Eagle Moss, to another Strange New Worlds review, where today Memento Mori. God, I had this whole thing lined up, and then I almost said the definitive Starship review series without access to a proper table. God, I've messed everything up. Yeah, this should be an interesting one. Probably also delayed, unlike I said it wouldn't be, but whatever. It's an interesting one because it's called Memento Mori, which the episode I'm certain is going to explain this, but is an old, this is going to be an explanation largely from Doctor Who, so probably a bit British biased. I think 8th Doctor, Big Finish stuff did a lot with it, but anyways, it's remember death, Latin for remember death, and it's basically a philosophy, kind of just remembering one's own mortality and kind of keeping that in mind, where it could also be like a noun, where you have like a skull in your room. A human skull is a memento mori. That's kind of why, like, is it Victorian, Elizabethan, that old kind of curiosity room-esque, you kind of have like just the random skulls or whatever people had. It was a memento mori, just a reminder of one's own mortality. Interesting is an episode of Star Trek, because, as you probably gathered from the last review, I hate Memento Mori. Like, it's in the olden times, it was probably harmless enough. I mean, it's still not ideal where, like, where if we wanted to extend the human lifespan or whatever, we wouldn't have the foggiest idea where to begin. But it still sets, like, that dangerous precedent. It's what I'm not going to go into it again from last week, but it kind of sets almost the defeatist attitude, or like, we're all gonna die and that's just something we should accept, yada yada. I hate it. But in the context of Strange New Worlds, Memento Mori says Captain Pike to me, and I adore the Captain Pike storyline. You might say it's a bit hypocritical, but like, it's a bit different when Pike actually knows how he's gonna die, and it's that sacrifice, heroicism, like, stuff. I guess to me it's the distinction between suicide and self-sacrifice. But I mean, I'm not gonna complain about more of that. Someone brought to my attention Text Trek. I've been in some of their live streams recently. I'll put them somewhere, description, iCard. They point out that we've had a lot of this Pike stuff, which I don't complain about because I love it, but yeah, it could become too much, could kind of become repetitive, and you want to see more of the characters. The other characters kind of being left behind. I agree with that, that the other characters being left behind. I don't particularly care. It's kind of could end up like Voyager, where it becomes the 7 Doctor Janeway show, which it's been ages since I've watched Voyager, but I never really had a problem with that, because it became better when it became the 7 Janeway Doctor show, because those are just the best characters. Or rather, the ones that were really developed. Sorry, Tom. But, I acknowledge that's kind of pushing the problem of, well, the problem is that none of the other characters were really developed. And yeah, like, I don't want to say that the only person I really care about is Pike, and like some of the repeat ones. Like, I don't know any of the new people's names. That's common for me. I know Hammer, because his name is Hammer. That's not a name, that's an appliance, so that, autism-wise, that doesn't go in one ear out the other. But, like, I care about Una now, like, after last episode. Dr. Mbangle is interesting. There are some people, like Uhura and Chapel, they're gonna have to do a lot to get me to care about, because it's that recasting of a classic character. I just don't like that, and I don't like the ways that they're different. People change, but most people don't, and usually not by much, kind of thing. Uhura's fine so far. Chapel, I can't really see becoming the much more submissive Chapel we see in TOS. I will never like Spock. We don't talk about Spock. But yeah, I don't care about... It's the 2 other girls who... I don't quite blend them in my head like I used to, but they're interchangeable to me. We don't know anything about them. You could say they haven't had their episode enough. Fair. Hammer, I never really liked the aggressive characters. Pulaski, I guess. Is it just Pulaski vibes? I don't know. Hammer needs to do stuff for me. He doesn't seem like that Starfleet kind of type. I think Hammer would work a lot better as an Andorian for me. Because, like, he sort of got those Andorian descriptions. Like, if he was a Shran, that would work. I think it's because he's an Anir is what the problem with me. Because the Anir, it's been a while since I've seen the episode, but we're always like that hyper pacifist, perfect society sort of thing. And I just don't really see this guy in that. Maybe he could be like raised by Andorians. I mean, it's right there. It's the planet their moon goes around. Maybe he's just more Andorian than he is Anir. I mean, I'm an American who hates America with the burning passion of 1,000 suns. Oh, I forgot I said that. Well, I guess we're going to prove it here today. But I think, you know what? As I watch this, I'm going to start looking at him as an Andorian. Like, culture-wise, not species-wise. I wonder if he might start working better for me. But anyway, yeah, I could be wrong. It could not be Pike at all. It could be a horrific Memento Mori episode. I'm going to have to try and review it without rehashing what I talked about last week. But hey, at least it's not Spock Amok. That's gonna be an episode for me. Yeah, let's just get into the review. I'm babbling at this point. Sometimes with these decade-spanning projects like Star Trek, Doctor Who, you find, you come across something, an instance or an episode, that it just kind of makes you appreciate the dedication that went into the craft of making it. Like, it doesn't, even the quality doesn't matter with something like that, Or maybe they, like, messed with the canon or whatever in ways you don't like, but you can still recognize and see the quality that goes into the care that went into researching what you're actually handling, because we've all seen how, what happens when you don't do that. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who, pick your favorite. And, Sensors is a little example of that. But I think the biggest one is that this was not an episode of Star Trek. This is an episode of a television show from the submarine warfare genre, which is what the original series was. For those of you who don't know, which is going to be younger Trekkies who don't go back and kind of look in the history of these shows and stuff, the submarine warfare genre was something in the early 20th century. I think it was kind of fading in the 60s. This is well before my time. But as it sounds, it was movies about people in submarines. I guess not necessarily in wartime, but like wartime, Cold War, it's Balance of Terror, which is the token submarine warfare example. In fact, I think it basically copied or is like an homage to some movie. It was a huge genre back in the day. And Star Trek's done it before. There's a Deep Space Nine episode where the Defiant's in a gas giant. It's very similar. But everything about this, I was not on the Enterprise. I was on a submarine. When they started doing the pinging, the radars, that was just a submarine. The way the hull buckles. They even talk about the gas giant like it's the water. Because, they're both fluid. They talk about the dives, the pressures, sealing the bulkheads. This was a submarine warfare episode, which just gets that classic TOS feel, because that's what TOS did. TOS was very often a submarine warfare show. Wagon Trail in Space, kind of that space western is how it was pitched, but a lot of the greats like Balance of Terror, and I'm going to struggle to find more, it gets a lot of that inspiration because spaceships in submarines, tension drama-wise, and even logistically, there's a lot of similarities in that kind of remote thing in a hostile environment that you're on your own for. I also alluded, though, that that's separate from the quality of the episode, and Strange New Worlds really is interesting. It's almost backwards to me compared to some of the other modern Star Treks, in the sense that the modern Star Treks I don't like are because generally the show is all right. Season 2 of Discovery was awful as a show, but the season 1 of Discovery, Picard, season 1 of Picard, they're all right as shows, at best. The problems are kind of the Star Trek things. Strange New Worlds is a really good show, where generally the problems I have that haven't been episode ruining are Star Trek problems. Hang on, I explained that completely wrong. That's how I feel about Strange New Worlds. With Discovery and Picard, you kind of want more of that Star Trek and less of the generic shows. With Stranger Worlds, I kind of want more of this show and less of what is currently Star Trek, if that makes sense. Like, everything they do becomes Star Trek. Like, the Dominion wasn't Star Trek until Deep Space Nine had the Dominion. But, let's take these little guys, the Gorn. The Gorn are interesting as an enemy, because it's been a while since I've watched, Arena, the original TOS Gorn episode. But I know people online complained beforehand. They said if they do the Gorn, that's going to complicate the timeline, because the Arena, they didn't know who the Gorn were. Which I'd have to double check. Generally people complaining about a franchise on the internet are not great primary sources. Even me, I've gotten things wrong before. But it is interesting with this level that, like, if the Arena, they don't really know who the Gorn are at all, which is my memory, that, like, every starship captain wouldn't be aware of the Gorn. Like, every starship captain knows about Q. Like, Picard's the only one who ever dealt with them, but when they get to Sisko and Janeway, every Starfleet officer is taught about Q because of how dangerous important that is. And given the Gorn don't surround the Federation, they're in one area of space, like, the fact that the Enterprise would be in that area of space, and I've just realized as well, with so many people who have actually fought the Gorn, Uhura, Chapel, and Bangles, Spock, I'm not sure it's really gonna hold up. I like that they haven't seen the Gorn. If we never see the Gorn, that's good, but it's just sometimes the weird things, like, okay, the Gorn make a clicking noise, as we've never seen them do. TOS is weirdly, it's fine, because we don't really see the Gorn in TOS. We see them in Enterprise, where they really don't do it. I guess, no, okay, you do have an out that it's like mirror universe Gorn, and they look kind of different anyway. Okay, there are outs. No, I'll give you, there are outs. But it's just kind of the token example of a lot of those weird things, where then they, like, communicate with the lights, which, again, we've never really seen them do. It feels kind of weird. I don't know, I'll be honest, there's about an hour's gap between watching the episode and this, because my roommate came in for a bit. So I'm struggling to come up with those examples I had in my head. But often I remember just finding that a bit of a, this would be better if it wasn't Uhura. If it wasn't these people I know. If it was strange new worlds. But I don't know, people know my opinions on these recurring stuff. I'm not going to spend too much time dilly-dallying them. Let's go a fun story with our little Gorn episode, which, by the way, I don't own this or Chang over there, because I really like these characters. These were like blind bag stocking stuffers one year. They've just been great little decorations. I've told this story before, but the Gorn are interesting for me because I used to work at a McDonald's. I've mentioned this before, and one of the coworkers there was once talking how they had an uncle who was actually in the original Star Trek, and, like, they had some scenes with Kirk and stuff, and I was like, oh, that's cool. When they learned I was a Trekkie, that's really cool. Like, who they played, you remember? It's like, Alien number 3 or whatever. They played, like, some random Klingon in the background. They were like, they played the Gorn. I was like, the Gorn. Like, yeah, I used to work with either the niece or nephew of the man who played the Gorn, which is my claim to fame. I don't remember if it was the niece or nephew, because I literally had no reason to remember this person until that day, which was their last week of work. I did not, unfortunately, get to meet the Gorn, or get an autograph on the Gorn or anything. But yeah, I don't remember if it was the niece or nephew. That's my little claim to Star Trek fame, though. Did you know that? I am 2 degrees of separation. Well, no, I'm 4 degrees of separation from William Shatner. It goes me, that coworker, the Gorn, William Shatner. Which makes me 5 degrees of separation from Patrick Stewart. Huh. But anyway, another thing, the Gorn, there were a lot of good things. Like, the Gorn ship, from a distance, I thought it was the original TOS penis ship, which I call it. You barely see it. In fact, it might be one of those remastered only things. Where you see the Gorn ship is this weird tri-silhouette thing, but I'm showing an Eagle Moss picture right now probably because it's the best model. That's got like this weird jutty out dick thing. I don't know, it looks real weird. But they kind of copied that here. They really changed it a lot, It's kind of that similar, I don't know, you've got different variations of a common theme. The Tholian, there you go, the Tholians in Enterprise and TOS are a good example, where it had that weird kind of you can kind of see what they're doing. It was, I don't know, a bit much for this close in the timeline for me, but that's the nitpicky area. It was pretty good. It's a lot better than it could have been. They actually looked at the Gorn ship, which was like 5 pixels, and designed their ship around that. Well done. But yeah, there was something that really kind of bothered me in this episode. Let's start a bit more abstractly, where this episode opens and it's Starfleet Remembrance Day. That's the name of the holiday, right? Which is, we've never heard of it before, but I'm willing to let that go. Like, we just happen to have never had an episode on Starfleet Memorial Day. I do want to know what ship Uhura served on before the Enterprise as a cadet. But, hey, it's Starfleet Memorial Day. No, Starfleet Remembrance Day. Might have been Memorial Day, one of the two. The keyword is Starfleet, we'll get to that. Which is basically, hey, let's remember all the people that died in the line of duty. It did feel more Starfleet is a military, which I've never liked, but a lot of the speeches did focus on, the exploration sciencey. Well, the astronaut corps has something like this, don't they? Both the NASA and Soviet. I think NASA might have a combined one. I know there's something like this. But the point is, we set this as like remembrance of the people who died. It's forefront in your mind going into this episode. And everyone's wearing the badges. You never forget it. It's addressed all throughout. But we're also just blowing up like 3 Gorn ships and then 1 Mega Gorn ship. Actually, the Mega Gorn ship survived. But like, you're forcing them to kill their own Gorn and people on there, and it really brings it down, because you're just thinking, like, yeah, that's a load of dead people now. This episode, I don't like to touch on the real world. This episode does suffer from when specifically it is being released, that they would have had no idea of knowing about a lot of things going in the world right now that make characters dying in fiction much more real than you might otherwise be able to like toss it aside. But it's beyond that, and it's something I hate as well more, where this is Starfleet Remembrance Day. This is not actually, it's just called Remembrance Day, isn't it? The rest of the world has Remembrance Day on November 11th. I don't know because I'm American, but they have like, let's remember all soldiers who died basically in every war. But America, we have a day for that, but in America, that day is, let's remember all the Americans that died in the war, in every war. And I hate that. See, I told you, Memorial Day is this Monday, and I told you that I'm American who hates America. This episode really felt, especially because it's Starfleet Memorial Day, and they never address that the losses that they're feeling are also happening to the Gorn. It really brought up those patriotic just bullshit. Yeah, I'm not saying that Starfleet officers die, that's bad, but it's also just the complete failure to recognize the exact same thing is happening on the other side in what is now a military engagement, not the civilians dying exploring planets, but a military engagement is just how you get to worlds like this. It's how you get the us and them situations. It's how, when Russia invades Ukraine, you don't hate Putin. You get violence against like all Russians everywhere. Have nothing to do with it. It's just bad and not Starfleet. And you might be saying, well, the Gorn were the aggressors here. Like, they showed up and started shooting at the Enterprise. And yeah, I mean, as I've just said, blame Putin, blame Hitler, not the Germans and the Russians. And I'll even be willing to accept that maybe there's some Gorn law, acknowledging we don't know. But like, this really is Gorn, just the Gorn government allows Gorn to go out and hunt. And these Gorns were like, you know what? That colony, we're going to go and kill everyone on there. And every single person on the ship just decided that is what they're going to do. They are the aggressors entirely. Does anybody remember The Arena? The Arena is the TOS episode with the Gorn. Do you remember the plot? Because the plot of The Arena isn't Kirk fights a Gorn. The plot of The Arena is that the Enterprise goes to a colony and discovers that it has been destroyed and everyone has been slaughtered. They find then a ship in orbit, who were the people who destroyed the colony, and chase it down because, hey, they've just gone into Federation space and destroyed a brand new colony, like a declaration of war, and they're monsters. They discover it's the Gorn, and they get into this battle. And after whatever alien race it is, I can't remember, puts them on the planet. Actually, it's just before. They learn from this third party that actually the Federation colony was put down in Gorn space. The Gorn had claimed that space long before the Federation showed up. And it wasn't the Gorn that had gone into Federation territory. The Gorn were not the aggressors. It was the Federation who unknowingly just walked into Gorn territory and claimed the planet. Now, what you have here in this episode is the Enterprise going up to a colony, discovering it has been obliterated and everyone has been killed, well, nearly everyone, and then finding a ship in orbit, learning it's the Gorn, and relentlessly going after them because they believe the Gorn are the aggressors here because they're in Federation territory. The only difference between those two scenarios is in TOS, we learn that that colony was in Gorn space. I'm not saying that the Federation colony is in Gorn space. I'm saying that the Gorn may have had a very good reason to believe the Federation were the aggressors here. The only reason that we have to believe the Gorn were hunting is because Leon, who is clearly very racist and unobjective, said that the monsters, who were pure evil and have dead eyes because they're reptilian eyes and not like ours, and they trigger primal fear responses because they're bad and they're hunting. And this is an episode that deals with the topics of the memorials and the sacrifice, and you could have had very powerful things, even challenging Leon, going, hey, the Gorn have families too. Like, hundreds of Gorn died in this episode, likely, and we're just throwing that out the window. And yes, it is partially the Gorn's fault that they don't tell people where their territory is, and their policy for incursions, there's the word I've been searching for, is to kill the people who have encroached on the territory unknowingly. Like, that's bad, but it's also the Federation jumping to conclusions and not actually figuring out why, or not even acknowledging. Like, I'm not saying that the Enterprise should have lied back and said, well, the Gorn are sentient, we can't kill them. No, the Enterprise is defending itself. But it's... I've talked about this in other cases before. It's stuff like this, where not Remembrance Day, but Starfleet Remembrance Day, and things like that, they create an atmosphere that elevates this group, in this case Starfleet, above everyone else. I can't remember what the case was, but there was another episode where I complained about them treating the murder of a Starfleet officer is worse than the murder of, like, some random civilian. Cops, you get this attitude. I don't know if it's in real life as well, but in, like, shows and stuff where, you know, the cop killer is, like, the worst kind of criminal. And that's backwards. Because, no, the murder of the civilians should be seen as, like, just as bad, but if anything worse than the murder of the people who have put themselves at risk to try and protect the civilians. I want to say it was just a Discovery episode. I honestly cannot remember where that complaint came from. If someone knows in the description, feel free to shout it out. But yeah, it just, a lot of that rubbed me the wrong way. It's like, yep, these are a bunch of Gorn dying, and from what we know about their pattern of behavior, for all we know, they could be defending themselves from an incursion. Wrongly, but they're not the monsters. Like, I adored when Leon went on her little racist speech that Pike immediately, when everyone left, I wish he kind of addressed it in the moment, but I also respect that, you know, before he's gone, he's like, no, Leon, hang on a minute. And I kind of wish he was a bit more direct about it, but I like how he handled it. It's definitely his style. I mean, mad respect for Pike there. If the show had not done that scene, God, I'd be a lot angrier in this review now. Even the ending where it's like, we made it through, but 7 crew members lost their lives. let's not mention the hundreds of Gorn. It bothers me as well. Maybe it's a uniquely American problem too. Like when we learn in history, is it World War One, the sinking of the Lusitania? And usually America enters a war because some country made a mistake, blew up civilian casualties, civilian something, and there happened to be Americans on it. When you learn about the sinking of the Lusitania in America, you learn that they sunk, was it the Germans or someone, sunk the Lusitania, killing several passengers, including 2 Americans. That is what you learn. I have no idea how many people were on the Lusitania, but I know it was 2 Americans because we make the distinction. Like, we don't even bother to list how many people died, and God, I hate reports like that. Some of them don't even mention other people. That you could believe that there were just 2 Americans on this boat, and that's it. And there are other examples. The Lusitania is the one I remember, but I just hate these distinctions everywhere they appear. I struggle to say it was a really enjoyable episode because of those themes, and again, reminding me of too many real-world things recently. But beyond that, it was a well-made episode, and beyond those, I wish it wasn't these characters that we remember, there was pretty good. There was a lot of, classic Star Trek episodic stuff, you got A plot, B plot, C plot. You've got the sick bay that needs the power. You've got the 2 crew members stuck. One can't do anything. The other has to go and fix it, whatever. You had a lot of good scenes, like the meetings. I liked using the science to kind of solve the puzzles. When Spock built the radar, the gravitational lensing stuff, which they managed for the first time in a long time, in memory, but I'm sure it's not completely true. They picked science topics that I'm like, I know of this, but I don't know enough to really say that you're wrong. Sometimes I feel they are wrong, like the Coriolis effect stuff. In my mind, that's way bigger scale than what they could use. But, I don't know that it wouldn't work for sure. I guess thinking about it, it's kind of weird. With the thing they talked about with the black holes, or the object kind of appearing to stop, is real. I don't know if that's gravitational redshifting, but that effect is real. I suppose they didn't really do it, though, when we actually saw it. And that actually hurt me for a lot of these episodes, where they explained something that was really good, and they showed something different. When they talked about the torpedo thing, where they were going to track the Gorn with, going through the gas giant, and it's like, the Gorn can't sense us. They can't see us. Their sensors can't detect us, but we can detect them. And I'm like, this is a great plan. And then they cut to, a mostly empty room where you could just look out the window and see the massive Enterprise, and the Gorn ship looks like it's mostly window. Even if somehow the sensors can't detect a clear line of sight to the massive ship meters behind them, can no one just see it? There's no crew quarters where someone just looks out and goes, oh my god, it's the Enterprise right there. In these shots, we can see through the Enterprise windows. Why can't the Enterprise, even if the Gorn can't see them, why can't the Enterprise detect them? Or at the very least, why can't someone stand and look out the window? The bridge view screen is a window in Strange New Worlds. You can just see them. You might say it's just, making it clear for the audience, which I hate every time they do it. But, if you want that defense, we see the Gorn later communicating by shining lights on each other in the brown dwarf. So that doesn't work unless you actually can see each other in the brown dwarf. And you also have Leon and Spock watching this through a window. And they can see the symbols and interpret them because they literally just see them looking out the window. No one sees, the shuttle. They don't see that the light comes from the shuttle and not the other Gorn ship. That the angles are wrong for that. I don't know. God, I'm feeling more negative when going into this, because the next thing I want to talk about is, I was liking it. It was pretty tense. Is a submarine warfare. They usually are. Balance of Terror is tense as hell. But there's the episode where they're like, if we go into the brown dwarf, we're gonna die, whatever. And Pike's like, we're not gonna die. He says that with certainty. And it's inspiring the crew thing. But he knows for a fact he is not going to die, because he knows undeniably that he dies in about 10 years. Well, he doesn't die. He knows that he's alive in about 10 years to become wheelchair bound. And this is actually a problem I've seen others come up before. After I did my review on the last episode, someone pointed out that when he chooses to defend Una, they thought it felt very hollow, because Pike knows for a fact that he is going to be in a Starfleet uniform 10 years from now. And he knows there aren't going to be consequences for this, because otherwise he wouldn't be training cadets. They're wrong, because the only thing you can glean from Pike's knowledge of the future is that he does not die in the next 10 years. In fact, I like the interpretation that because Pike defends Una, Starfleet discovers this, and his punishment is he loses his captaincy and has to train cadets. And that is why he ends up being wheelchair bound. I mean, it's beyond wheelchair bound. There are a lot of problematic ways we talk about disability with this specific instance. I might do an in-depth talk later on, because this has a lot of them. Because we don't want to do that in-depth talk every time, yes, I do want to acknowledge a lot of the problematic ways that it is talked about. But yeah, it's a lot of a hollow gesture when you know that nothing bad is going to happen because of it. I like that ending of Strange New Worlds. I kind of hope they do it, actually. Very poetic, especially with Una being the one really pushing him to change destiny. It's because of her that Pike gets his destiny. Well, I love that. But, like, there are still problems in that knowledge that you don't die, and that Pike can take more risks like this, and it's fine. Like, there are two options here. Either Pike is going to get everyone killed because he thinks it's immortal. He's immortal, which is problematic. Or the Klingon was right, I can't remember his name, and Pike's future is a guaranteed fixed point in time because he touched the crystal, which means that you lose tension. We'll talk about in-universe. It means there's no tension because Pike knows unequivocally he is not going to die. And in a scenario like this, there's no case where crew members die, but Pike lives, like flying in that black hole. It is everyone or no one, meaning everybody lives. But it also means that Pike can't be a captain outwardly. He can't have that confidence or that bravery or that courage, because it is not confidence and it is not brave and it is not courageous to know unequivocally that you were in no danger and then to perform an action. You can't see Pike as courageous when he says, "We're not going to die," because he just knows it is fact. Outside of universe, you also have the problem where, as an audience member, I don't feel the tension because I know unequivocally that nobody in this scenario is going to die. Now, you can have that problem with main characters anyway. It is possible to get around it. Discovery did, like destroying Quajon. Killing a red shirt you really liked or even killing a main character, yeah, you can do it. I think the death of Tasha did a lot for TNG, kind of establishing that mortality. And let me point out that both Discovery and Lower Decks killed a major character. Discovery did it in their second season, Lower Decks in their first. I'm pretty sure, yeah, Discovery did it in its second season. But yeah, I mean, they could die. Like, if Uhura wasn't there, killing Hammer, sure, they could have done that. A nice little tease, kind of building him up to be bigger than he was going to be. I think their transporter chief, like, I really want them to kill off a lovable side character. Like, God, I still think it would have been best if Kirk had died. If it wasn't Kirk and he had died in Children of the Comet, that would have done so much. The transporter guy, when he was running for the door, I think he should have died, and it would have elevated the tension so much more. Because I kind of care about the guy, and I don't know why, and I would have been sad if he died, and he's not just a random red shirt. He's a character that's there, and killing him would have meant that not Pike, of course, not Spock, not Una, not Uhura. Actually, Una could have died, but some of these other people who are more minor yet and haven't really gotten development. Like, I suppose you probably can't kill Aeon, but Hammer and the other girl whose name I'll never remember, I'll learn it, but it's gonna take time. Yeah, they could have died. And feasibly, they could have died. And it's feasible, it just needs to be feasible enough that it's tense. And yeah, once Pike delivered with absolute certainty a line saying he's not gonna die, it made me realize that we do know absolute certainty that he's not gonna die. And the prequel problem just compounds it. Yeah, let's get into the scene by scene, where hopefully I'll be a bit more positive. I also felt my voice going 34 minutes ago, and I do kind of want to get to the ending. I hate this Previously On. I really don't like them everywhere else, because it's always been a bit of a here's what's coming up in this episode. In Discovery, what Previously On does is take the clever realizations out of genuinely clever setup. Because when the Previously On mentions something that happened 4 episodes ago, kind of randomly, you know it's going to be important, and when it becomes important, it's not fun anymore. You just knew. It's just next time on, which I hate as well. I always skip those. But just vaguely, it's like thinly veiled. I hate them. And Strange New Worlds, I hate them even more because there's no external plot, and all it does, like this Previously On, we had 3 scenes of Leon just kind of random, but also dealing with how she's tough, and she hates her genetic engineering past, and she has trauma. What I knew instantly is this is going to be Leon's episode, where Leon gets development, and it's going to be important about her traumatic past and her tough attitude. Already, I've seen the A-plot. The next is a scene of Hemmer. Actually, it was 2. When you get 2 scenes of Hemmer, you know he's going to be important. We then had a scene of Uhura, where I'm like, oh, I guess here's our 3rd important character, and we back to Hemmer. I'm like, maybe that was nothing. We then had 2 important scenes of Uhura. So great. This is an episode that's going to have Leon development, and Hemmer and Uhura are going to be very important. Already, before the episode started, I feel like I have seen the episode, which just makes me angry. I want to watch the episode. It's so much better if you just open with the captain's log. You don't need a Previously On, and it just spoils things. It's like in classic Star Trek, when you'd watch an episode, and it'd say, like, featuring Jeffrey Combs as Brunt. Now I know Jeffrey Combs is in this episode. Not gonna be fun when he shows up. Wouldn't that have been a nice surprise? I get really passionate about this. I'm getting a bit too angry, but yeah, and even if you're wrong, like, it still taints your experience of the episode. You're going to try solving the puzzles looking at Uhura and Hemmer, and how Leon's gonna fit into this. And when there's a mysterious, like, destruction on a colony, you think it might be the Gorn, because you know Leon is important in this episode. Wouldn't it have been great to have revealed the Gorn, or like slowly build up, where you see the clues of, like, you see the ties to Arena, which again ultimately hurt this episode, but you see those and you wonder and you get closer and closer. But no, because we know Leon is important in this episode, and they bring up her past, well, you know it's probably the Gorn. Not because you've figured it out, but because you've seen already that it is the Gorn in the Previously On. God, I hate these. I think I'm going to try and find a way to skip them in the future. Editing Nathan here, and I don't normally do this, but I wanted to jump in because I found the perfect example of what I think the difference is, where if you're a Doctor Who fan, particularly the classics as well, when you watched modern Doctor Who, the scene where they reveal the Master, and that one character gets revealed as a Master brilliantly for both new and old audiences. But what's relevant here is just the little hints that keep getting bigger and bigger. It's like, oh, it's gotta be the Master, you just say it, right? Imagine if that episode started with a Previously On where they showed some of the classic Master doing stuff. God, that's the difference. It's just absurd. It's just all these problems are there on serialized television too. It's just more exaggerated in episodic television. Star Trek did do Previously On in the classics, but they did them for 2-parters, where you didn't really need them now, but even then it was more a recap, and because it's still this one self-contained story, it's just telling you, like, what happened in that self-contained story, and every now and then you do get, like, here's the thing you needed to remember that you now know is gonna come up, but they never did it for just like that random episode of Star Trek. Data's Day did not have a previously on that showcased Data in case you forgot he was a person. If you want me to remember your characters and facts about them, then you need to write a good character. Like, if you've done a good job with your character, I won't need to be reminded about them. Modern Star Trek and mental health is interesting, isn't it? Because they really want to be that progressive view of mental health in the future, where the stuff we're dealing with now about making mental health not taboo, they want us to have solved that and reached that. But it's also weirdly has to reconcile with wanting characters to be affected by the world around them. And episodically, if something happens in a mission, that makes sense. But it becomes weird when you have a character like Leon. And I want to say Discovery. I thought Discovery had someone with that sort of PTSD thing as well. Not Detmer, but like where it would affect the mission. Like, Leon is refusing treatment, which kind of challenges, like, okay, so there is still some taboo because she is refusing it. Like, if her leg was broken, you wouldn't see her refusing it because she's a tough, strong character who doesn't like leaning on people. She'd go, my leg is broken, I'm gonna go see the doctor. She might try and limp to the doctor, but she's gonna go to the doctor. It becomes challenging when you're like, okay, she's refusing treatment, but would Starfleet have put her on the Enterprise? Because this is a woman who had her trauma, applied to Starfleet, got in, and got assigned to the Enterprise, got assigned as Chief of Security, a position which may deal with the Gorn, while having this trauma and refusal to go through it. I just struggle to see even like a organization now doing that, where there is that taboo. And, number one kind of goes, I guess there's nothing I can do to help it. And she's in an awful position. But, it's hard to imagine a progressive view of mental health not going, you are not allowed to be in this position until you go get help. You can come back and have your position afterwards, but you are not allowed because you were putting others in, like, not only the damage to yourself, it's putting the lives of everyone on the ship in danger. When a woman who we saw give this description of the Gorn is in charge of the tactical decisions against the Gorn, that is a problem. I guess it's a have your cake and eat it too situation. I'm not saying you can't do it, but yeah, it's happened a couple times in this sort of scene in the Star Treks in modern times. For people in my last review who were saying that they couldn't do the darkness and actually turn off the lights in the last episode when they said, they were going to turn off the lights, here's a great use of a darkly lit scene that increases tension, that we actually can see what's going on, and the characters have flashlights to focus on what's important, while having fire and, like, explosion-y stuff light up the scene. Exactly like I said you could do last episode. I actually like the scene for a lot of reasons, because it's something I don't think we'll see a lot, and felt really TOS, and that this was a budget saver. Like, it's a good scene, it's a pretty good set, but it's also clearly not a set. It's like some boxes in just a warehouse and there's nothing around them. And it's just black because they don't want you to see that there's no set. And TOS did that a lot. It's fascinating. Even if you don't like the original series or sci-fi, anyone kind of interested in that making films, I highly recommend the original series, especially season 3, because Gene Roddenberry was a master of getting things done with no budget. And there are episodes like The Empath where the set is an empty room. It's literally a completely empty warehouse where you can't even see the walls. It's like the floor and a bed. And that is the set. And he manages to make it work so well. Spectre of the Gun, is it? The Western one, the OK Corral, where they don't have the money to build a Western town. And so he goes, all right, in the plot of this episode, like, the aliens are just going to recreate the bare minimum is basically a stage play, because that's all that's needed for the aliens and their purpose. And so they get away with building, like, this stage of Western walls where they're not even buildings. There's just, like, the floor, maybe a front wall, and, like, the door. And that's everything. And, like, It's brilliant. Gene Roddenberry, one of the best things he could do was get away with like using no budget. I don't think they needed to go this low. Like, they have a budget. You still need to, do budgeting and saving. Some episodes are going to be more expensive than the other. And maybe we haven't seen the episode that needed, like, all the money from this. But I love just kind of getting that Strange New Worlds feel of like, I know that we did not have the money to build a set. But I can appreciate the craftsmanship of, let's make it look like in TOS when they didn't have the money for a set. I know some people complain about it, and like most people recognize that TOS was masterful at getting away with no budget, but it genuinely might be my favorite thing about TOS is just watching the clever ways that, as I understand it, it was Gene Roddenberry, could just get away with literally nothing. Original Star Trek is cheap. It is never Doctor Who, where the effects are laughably bad. It takes its minimum budget and it incorporates it into the story. It's amazing. Caveat to that claim, I don't think I've ever seen the original series, just the remastered version. So some of the green screen work is noticeably better. Whoever designed this ship, I applaud you. Here's a great Star Trek thing you've done, because it's one of those designs where I look at it and I go, I have seen this before, but I haven't. It's a brand new ship. It just speaks the language so much. It's kind of like those Horizon, is it the Horizon class? The old Enterprise era freighters that were like the Warp 2 huge things. You could see it from the side. I think those nacelles going down. Without reference images, of course. This view, it's got is it the Contasega? It is colony ship. I think it was the Alpha Centauri colony ship, Proxima Centauri, the Enterprise colony, Terra Nova. It had that language, that Enterprise era civilian ship language, and it kind of progressed into TOS, the Strange New Worlds aesthetic. Just it's the perfect new Starfleet ship because it speaks the language and it makes you feel like you've seen it before, but it's entirely new. You think you've seen it before because it just nails that language. I don't know if maybe they've taken this from some game, some fan out, some side canon, but even if that's why, like, it's still the dedication to go look at that side canon. Like when Picard brought up stow ships because it's set in that time. I'm generally not a fan of the stow ships. I like the reasoning and the logic behind it. I just generally don't like the designs. But I can appreciate the, hey, the fans want the stow ships because we're in this century. It makes sense. Free assets. Bam. Let's just take this side canon, incorporate it into the main stuff. But I'm pretty sure it is an original design, and hands off to whoever designed this. You nailed it. I think it's the first ship I've seen and gone, this is from Enterprise. Like, not in the fact that it's actually from Enterprise. Maybe it is. I don't know. But from the fact that it feels like it is a ship from the Enterprise era, they've just kept using it, which I love. This was also kind of weird when the mother's like, she's like, the kid's seen a monster, and she's like, there's no such thing as monsters. Even ignoring the fact a colony has just been attacked, in a world with aliens who look very different than humans, like, they're not monsters, but if you have a real little kid who, they're generally pretty scared, God, I was a wuss as a kid, like, they might not be able to distinguish between, like, some monster and this is actually a sentient, person. You think you'd listen if the kid thinks they've seen a monster. At least ask, like, what did the monster look like? Because there's a chance, especially in this era, when so many of our neighbors are enemies, you want to make sure that the monster under the bed isn't actually some alien species. I've just realized they've never seen a Gorn. I can't tell. Like, Leon kind of makes it sound like she has actually seen a Gorn, but refuses to describe a Gorn, and everyone refuses to ask her, can you tell us what the Gorn look like? Maybe she kind of meant metaphorically, or I guess she can't remember what the Gorn look like, but why doesn't, I guess the kid hasn't seen it as well, but you think someone would at least ask, like, hey, what does the monster look like? Leon, I'm pretty sure did, but you think the mom might, like, not just dismiss it out of hand. When Molly says Rumpelstiltskin is in the bedroom, yeah, fine, don't believe her. But when a kid says that there's a lizard man under the bed, you might want to make sure that, like, there's not actually a lizard man. And by the way, yes, That first one is an actual episode of Star Trek.
He's in my room.
Who?
Rumpelstiltskin.
Well, don't look so distraught. I'm only here to offer you my services, if you should need them.
This was an interesting one for me, because you have this meeting, and like they're both talking to the engineer and the doctor, who probably have two of the most critical jobs, and they probably got a good idea of the status anyway, but like the engineer is just sitting here explaining how the core is going to explode if he doesn't fix it and not fixing it. And the doctor's explaining how they're horribly overworked and need supplies while like the patients are presumably just dying around him. Good old Star Trek where the enemy's going to stop shooting while they have the conversation. It's why we love it. They have the meetings, but yep, it's always there. Oh, I want to add as well, I did really like Hammer a lot more looking at him as someone raised under Andorian culture. He does not work raised under a Near, or like, that's my phone alarm, or like Enar culture. Is that what they called it in this episode for some reason? Enar? With like a hard E? Whatever. Because they were extreme pacifists, right? Even when the one lady was gonna like go with Archer to look for like the lost, her brother or whatever, just look, like that was considered helping in war. Like, Hemmer is in no way a pacifist. You cannot power the phasers that kill the Gorn and claim that you do not have bloods on your hands. I have been thinking for like the past hour on an analogy that does not tie to some direct world event right now, because as I've said, I kind of want this to be a place where you can escape, but there isn't one. And like, this is surely going to come to head, but Hemmer cannot possibly reconcile his pacifism with being an engineer on the Enterprise, being the chief engineer. Like, because I'm also someone who would be that extreme pacifist. And like, no, you can't do, I would be the extreme to the Anir, and no, you cannot do anything for Starfleet and consider yourself a pacifist, really, unless, I don't know, you're the ship's historian, then you might be alright. There are very few. Like, some blue uniform jobs, maybe, but you can't be that a near-level pacifism. Now, I'm all for his belief to defend the Federation values. I mean, the Federation at its core and the Starfleet values are worth fighting for. They might necessarily, especially in this era, always be represented, but it is a worthy cause. He's living a lie if he's under the delusion that he is following some pacifist principle. What does he say? He says pacifism isn't... He says something like pacifism isn't... I can't remember the word he used. It's like active. It's an active protection. No, that's actually not pacifism. The whole point of a pacifist principle is, I mean, it's not inaction in the sense that you very actively have to not take action. But yeah, I really hope they address, I'm sure they will at some point, like he has to be put in a position where he can't reconcile, like he's not doing pacifist work. He needs that episode, because that's just a flawed philosophy. You want a pacifist in Starfleet, go to Odo, who would never carry a phaser, and I am pretty sure throughout the entirety of Deep Space Nine, never killed anyone. Like, early on, he might have had some trouble finding himself, like where does he fit with the Cardassians and the Bajorans, but once he settled on that rule, he has taken action which accidentally has led to the death of others, like on the whatever changeling he did. But Odo never killed, I'm not sure he ever even hurt anyone, to be honest. Like, incapacitated them, might have stunned them at worst, not with a phaser, but that is pacifism to the extreme, where the guns do not kill. They are literally like harmless tasers, and he still won't carry them. In case you weren't sure, this is the scene I was talking about where Pike pulled Leon aside. Just so we're clear, this is the gaseous, high-pressure brown dwarf that the show is telling me the sensors don't work in, and that these ships can't see each other in. This. There is making it more clear for the audience, And then there is a vacuum. This is a vacuum. There is literally no gas here. The only gas is like way behind them. This is a vacuum. I haven't just paused it in a frame either. Like, this is just all space with like the occasional cloud. I've seen more clouds in a plane before. And not even in a cloud either. Like, just above them, I've seen more clouds. Alright, they've got to do old style medicine on Una. It's quite dangerous. They need the plasma, but like, you know, it's generally less risky to do the operation than to see if the power comes back. Fair. They then learn that someone else needs the plasma, right? And Una, you know, orders them to use the plasma on them. Great. Why do they still do the operation? Like, at that point, surely it's probably better to see if the power happens to come back on. Like, I don't know, at least maybe mention it. Be like, give it to her, that's an order, I'll wait for the power. And then Bengal says, even without the plasma, it's still less risky to do the surgery. And Una's like, fine then, do the surgery, but give them the plasma. Great. Do that. But it's okay, of course, because Dr. Mbengal's human blood is perfectly compatible with Una's Illyrian blood. Like, yeah, it's plasma, which I think is mostly water, but I don't know, that one feels weird. In another instance where they probably would have known she wasn't human. This isn't the scene, but you also had something I feel we really should have outgrown by now, is when they mentioned the brown dwarf was orbiting a black hole, the pilot was like, tried it like it was a big deal, which it's not. Like, it's 2022. Are we really still at the point where people think that black holes are worse than literally anything else? It's an object that has a lot of mass, and you can orbit it like any other object. Sure, the Enterprise might have to be more careful, like it might not be capable of reaching the speeds needed to orbit a black hole without warp, which itself then isn't an orbit. Like, yeah, it could still fall in, but you'd have to kind of try and fall in the black hole. It's not dangerous unless you drive into it. And they kind of addressed it, like it was just that one bit, but it really annoys me when people treat black holes like they suck everything in, but differently to how like actual gravity works. I feel like it's common knowledge, especially in the younger generations, like that would have gone through the more recent education systems. I don't know so much about the older generations that would have had to stumble upon the knowledge or like keep learning through YouTube or whatever. I feel we should know that black holes aren't bad. We can take pictures of them now. They're mundane. Also, wait, whoa. The Federation established a colony in a system that was a binary system of a black hole and a brown dwarf? Why? A brown dwarf isn't even a proper star. That is an interesting one. Was it a research base? Did I miss that? That was kind of weird. What I didn't miss was that they had a communication satellite. Just the one. This shuttle is massive. I think the Galileo shuttle was kind of big before. I don't remember. But this shit is massive. But two, my fan theory, my tinfoil hat fan theory to explain how this Spock reconciles with TOS Spock and the fact that they don't at all. Yes, just got stronger. So, can't remember if I've ever explained this on the channel before, but basically, Discovery Spock, this one's alright after episode 1, but Discovery Spock and TOS Spock do not reconcile at all. They just flat out don't work. I don't care what you have to say, they just don't work. As I point out a lot, it's the Spock that has literally, in the first episode of TOS, Spock has literally no concept of human emotion whatsoever. He has to think that, like, humans might react emotionally. He has to kind of take time to think about that. Oh, yes, one of your human emotions. I know the cage has him smile at some blue fucking flowers, but we don't see that episode until the 80s. Like, it was a canceled pilot. I know the Menagerie has that scene as well, but God, it's early TOS. There's loads of stuff that was changed. Rant over. But basically, the way I reconcile that in my head is Discovery Spock learned everything about his emotions, like all his emotional education, and this is said, this is not the theory, was through Burnham. It's through Burnham as a child, his childhood with Burnham, learning about that. That's what basically made him the person he is in Discovery. And where, of course, he then learns to, like, open up and trust people and all the stuff he doesn't do until the end of, TOS because of his relationship with Kirk and Bones, which is famous and fantastic. I said rant over. This is why we don't talk about Spock. My theory is that basically when the crew changes over from Pike to Kirk, it's a big crew rotation. Loads of people change. You have Una, Chapel, whatever, who themselves are new after they weren't there for Discovery. But it's a huge crew changeover, right? Where suddenly the whole crew of the Enterprise, or at least the majority, does not know the big secret about Discovery and Burnham. I mean, it seems even people like Leon might not know it. Well, actually, yeah, she's new because of, what's her face lady? You know what I mean. Anyway, my theory was that through the events of Strange New Worlds, Spock would realize how much he mind melds, because he does it all the bloody time, every Vulcan does, and that when he mind melds, that knowledge of Discovery and Burnham being transferred is too big of a risk. Like, he can't risk it, and so he wipes his mind of Burnham. Everything about Burnham Discovery, he wipes it, which resets his emotional education and everything, and makes him as totally, and yeah, honestly, a bit unbelievably ignorant as he is at the start of TOS. Because he is literally a child with no emotional education whatsoever. All he knows is his Vulcan discipline and logic. And it's why, throughout his copious mind melds with everyone in the entire franchise, no one learns about Discovery or Burnham. People have tried to refute that with, well, it's not really a knowledge share if you don't want it to be. Welcome to his first lesson, and that people can learn about Discovery and Burnham if he does these mind melds. And that for the reasons I honestly still don't understand, that it all has to be secret for the benefit of the galaxy, he's going to wipe his mind at the end of Strange New Worlds. That is my fan theory. It has just gotten stronger. You cannot take it away from me. I don't expect Strange New Worlds to show it. I would be overjoyed if they did in, like, the final episode. But that definitely happens between Strange New Worlds and TOS, because these two characters are irreconcilable. We don't talk about Spock. No, 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 no. Point 1. This is basically a Dira, but instead of a comet, it's an enemy species. Right? Like, this is basically a Dira. I've seen this scene before. Point 2. So the Gorn communicate with this weird light thing, right? They have an alien language, fine. He's managed to translate different words, like the lights into different words. Hoshi Sato levels of linguistic ability. Like, by God, this man has clearly been genetically engineered. But sure, I'll let it go, right? Maybe somehow he's been studying this for ages. Actually, he has. Wait, they were in, like, a camp, weren't they? All right, I'll give it to you. Because this page is the English alphabet and the numbers 1 through 0. I'll accept... well, it doesn't matter if the Gorn use base 10, you could probably translate it anyway. What I won't accept is that the Gorn have a lettering system that matches English. They're not our letters, they're the symbols, right? But the pattern of lights. Okay, which, thinking about it, is also from Discovery, a species that communicates by lights. Why is that not in the Discovery database, which I think the Gorn may have joined the Federation by that point? Why does Discovery not have that in its database when it's looking for similar communication styles? There's a question for you. Then again, maybe it's why the Universal Translator could work so quickly. But, some of these letters are gone. He doesn't have B, F, yada, yada, yada. A good chunk of those letters are missing, right? They don't have symbols next to them. So you may say, oh, well, it's not a 26-letter alphabet, right? Well, why is he recording their alphabet still? Because this is the word weak. W-E-A-K. And it shows the pattern of lights for weak. And the pattern of lights for weak spells W-E-A-K if you look at this. Actually, it spells E-A-K. You can't see W, but the beginning is right. So the Gorn are using an alphabet which has fewer characters than English, but if you happen to do the right translation where, like, Gorn, the letter matches with like A, and gerber matches with B or whatever. You have a language that will spell out the words as if they were English, because these lettering systems happen to line up exactly, despite not being the same length and being of entirely separate planetary origins. What? You could have done it. Just get rid of this. Just have it be numbers. Just have it be more words. Like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't how the universal translator works. Maybe you could say he wrote it in, like, Gorn letters he's seen and it's being translated, but... And, like, maybe this is sounds to match, but that doesn't work. The Gorn make, like, snarly stuff. They can't produce speech like a human, as we see in the arena and in A Mirror Darkly. This is gotta be the most offensive language thing I've ever seen in Star Trek, and I remember Hoshi. Like, you think at some point, I'm still going on about this. You think at some point making this prop, the person who did a very good job, it's like a good survival booklet, it's really nicely made prop. You think someone would have realized that, like, hang on, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it's not a minor no, you know what? We're moving on. On a final note, does anyone think that when you put a tarp over them, these photon torpedoes look like little Teslas? Is it just me? Like, you might say it took the gravity out of the situation, but I was already out of the, like, oh god, look at these heroes, when they called it Starfleet Remembrance Day. God, I hate something like that. This has been an hour and 15-minute review. It's been a very long review, so it is almost certainly going to be late. I've had a lot of stuff to do this evening. That was probably a middling episode, I'd say, honestly. There was a lot of real solid stuff there in how it was made, but there was also kind of some little... There's always going to be little problems, but, you know, it's more of these thematic problems I had. The way information was presented didn't quite match what was being described, like with the gases and stuff. And I found the tension wasn't really there because of some of the things we know they're going to happen to these characters, and that could have been handled better. They really need a lovable red shirt to die for this series. But it's... You know, it was pretty good. It wasn't bad. Some of the moral implications might be bad, but the episode as a whole wasn't bad, and it wasn't really promoting those moral implications other than existing in a world that has them a lot of the time. I mean, if you want to look even for a real world example where, you know, everyone will talk about the Ukrainian soldiers that'll being killed, but no one will talk about the Russian soldiers that are being killed. Like, these things do exist. And, like, sure, maybe some of the Russian soldiers, actually boots on the ground guys, will recognize what they're doing and still go through with it, but I feel we also know unequivocally that the vast majority don't. And the vast majority believe that they were going in to liberate people from an oppressive government that was, well, oppressing them. And I don't draw those lines. Like, the people like a Putin or a Hitler or Stalin, like, yeah, but when it comes to the boots-on-the-ground soldiers, I don't draw the line between the Ukrainians, the Russians, the Americans, the Germans, Starfleet, the Gorn, the Dominion. Take your pick. Like, it doesn't matter. It's just killing that is senseless and bad, and I hate, especially because for me as an American, with how I've grown up, creating those labels and those ties is tied directly and inseparably from American patriotism, which, God, this review has gone on too long anyway. This is going to be one of those reviews I have no idea how it's going to be reflected. I think it's going to be one that has a high proportion of dislikes, both because of the things I've said and the fact that I probably seem more negative than I did. Part of it was just forgetting all the little positives with that hour gap, but hopefully real soon we can get into the pattern where even if the videos are delayed by work or whatever, we'll find something where I can record these more immediately, earlier, and get into a strategy that works where we don't have to deal with these delays. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll We'll just have to see. Wait for next time. Thanks for watching, and I will see you for what Memory Alpha does not list the title for, episode 5. But when we got the first few titles, I feel like they were the first 5 episodes. And Spock Amok isn't on this list yet. Oh, next week is gonna be interesting.